Afternoon, everyone. Denise Fleckenstein. I was with the United Way for Southeastern Michigan for 12 years before retiring 2 years ago. And my main job was Director of Planned Giving, but I also did take on major gifts as well. And a lot of fun, enjoyed every minute of it. You know, the best part was meeting those donors and getting to know them. And you know, it's just kind of a joy to be able to do this work. And so I hope that everyone else is having those same kinds of experiences as well.
Thanks, Denise. And Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Dunne. I worked in 4 United Ways. I started in Jacksonville, Florida, then moved to Asheville, North Carolina as the CEO, and then on to Greensboro, North Carolina to be the CEO there. Then I moved to Birmingham, Alabama as the CEO in 1990 and started Planned Giving from scratch. And that journey from, there were 8 trusts in local banks that we kind of saw as the beginning of our endowment program. And the first one went back to 1942. An individual set up a trust. This was 1990. And so we started by just going out and identifying our long-term donors, those that were over 60 or so, and started to meet them and have friendly visits, thanking them for their great generosity over many years, asking them who got them started in giving to United Way and what's important to them. Then said, you know, you've been a wonderful donor for so many years. Have you ever thought about perpetuating your gift so that your good work can continue? And we had a little form, a commitment form, and started asking people if they would endow their annual gift, not in lieu of the annual gift. We wanted to keep the annual gift coming, but asked people, and thought it'd take about 25 times the annual gift to endow their gift and include us in their will, estate plan, or give however they chose to give. So from that little simple, humble start with volunteers, and this was the real success, because volunteers have the connections in the community, went out and made these calls year-round. And the United Way in Birmingham, Alabama will pass 100 million in endowment in the next couple of months from that humble start. So from knowing nothing technical, never got a technical question from any donor, because they have their own way of solving those problems, or they have their own finance people. But it was just friendly visiting and making the ask and doing it consistently year after year. And that's where it is today. I retired from the United Way after 18 years as CEO, and then because I had relationships in the community, continued to work on major gifts and planned giving on the endowment side. So that's a long story, but it's, I think, a wonderful story of the people in the community been given the opportunity to endow their gifts, and people, many of them, are happy to do it. And so I commend you for what you're doing in your community to advance the mission of the United Way, and working with volunteers. And I know the session here, you may not have the kind of staff resources. We started with a half-time person in Birmingham and did that for 3 years. And then we're able to hire, you know, full-time staff person and added to that over time. But anyhow, I'm very excited about planned giving and in building endowments and shaping the future and advancing the mission. So thanks for what you're doing.
Thanks, Dan. Well, I know others that have heard Dan's story have often reflected on the amount of money that was raised in Birmingham, such a significant amount that some of us at times hear that and think, how are we, like, how is it possible that you could raise that much money? And when you're in a 1, 2, 3, 4 person United Way, it feels a bit overwhelming. And I think the key is as you say, it can be as simple as making visits, talking to donors, expressing, you know, your gratitude for all that they've done to invest in the community through their annual giving, but also to help them think about their future gift and what legacy they may want to leave. So I appreciate you sharing that, Dan. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen here, since Wes Wicker, who is our guest speaker, is unfortunately having issues logging in. He was on earlier, and then I suspect that maybe because of where he's located today, his location, he's had some family stuff going on this last week, that he may just not be able to join us. But I will say this, if he isn't able to join us, I don't want you to feel this is a waste of your time. What I would like to suggest we do is we simply open it up and talk a bit about best practices, which historically these United Way Next office hours were designed for people to come and bring questions, to share best practices, and really just engage in conversation to hear from their peers what's working or what they could benefit from. And at this point, we have Dan and Denise, who are excellent experts in the field, who have done this work for years and certainly can help answer questions. And so I would just open up the floor and encourage us to let's utilize the time we can. And if for any reason someone drops off, we'll understand that you may want to, you know, use this time for something else. And if necessary, we'll reschedule Wes Wicker for another time and date in the future. So I want to this is my thought and my question for today. Seeing some of the names on the screens and knowing the conversations that I've had, I think when you are in a small United Way and you're doing everything, it's hard to imagine taking time to do one more thing. And I'm going to just share a personal story, and this is related to United Way Next, but it has to do with like your major donor gift strategy and the whole aspect of asking people to endow their gifts. And I had a conversation with one of our members who has created a named endowment and also makes a generous contribution each year. And he specifically asked me, Carol, what is the United Way Next major gift strategy, or like our strategy around this planned giving and endowment? And I honestly couldn't really give him a clear answer, because despite the fact we have all these very knowledgeable experts on our United Way Next team, we haven't really invested a lot of time since I arrived in really planning that out. And so I utilize these times when I'm with all of you to benefit our organization, just like I hope you are. But what I took from that wasn't criticism or concern that I wasn't doing enough, and rather took action from that experience and said, you know what? I can do better, and I'm going to do better, and I'm going to figure out ways to immediately impact this particular person. And I anticipate by inviting him to be along with us in this journey, that he's going to actually be able to help us develop what he sees as the right strategy. So I'm going to ask Denise if she'd weigh in on this for me. And because of this kind of conundrum, right? I've got a member who, or a donor who maybe is really motivated to invest, but they're looking for some way for us to say, this is the strategy. How do you go about creating that strategy and just taking the next step?
So the question is, a donor to United Way Next, or
Yes.
donor to,
but
okay.
it could be to United Way, right? If you're having a conversation with somebody and they allude to you that they want to invest more money, but like, what's your plan? And what if we don't have a plan?
Well, I always go back to the central question, which is, what is the impact of your United Way in the community? what is your impact? So for United Way Next, we should really lay out what do we hope to impact for, what's the impact for all of our members who join us at United Way Next. And we list those things, what we think we're doing to help everyone in the network and what they expect to learn, and lay those things out. My brain just wraps around what I would be doing in my own United Way, making sure that all the donors knew what impact we were having in our community, and largely through visits and talking about those impacts, and then asking for the gift. I don't know if that, I just think the impact is the central theme. You just have to show what the impact is going to be in order for somebody to be motivated to make a gift.
And what if you have no real strategy? You know, like you haven't even really thought this out. Is it as simple as engaging with your donors and writing them personal notes and inviting them to be a part of, once you feel like you can talk to them, what's kind of the plan? How do you go about making those asks?
Well, I mean, it's a cultivation process, right? You have to start somewhere. So it's a combination of visits and notes, and taking them to see the work. That is very helpful. I was on another Zoom call earlier today for the Plan Giving Roundtable for Southeastern Michigan, and we were talking about these same kinds of things and specific donors that we were working with. And the cultivation process, and forgive me, I don't know how big or small your United Way is, but you know, part of it is marketing to the people you work with, right? What you're trying to do. And specifically for Plan Giving, you're working with your CEO, your financial director, anybody who's also involved in the organization. I love that little kiss. That was awesome. So, you know, I really started out with developing those relationships, and anybody in programs, you know, those people were my angels. I utilized the people in the program work to come with me and talk to donors as well. So it's just, if you take just one donor and you go visit them and then you find out what they're interested in, Dan has talked about this a lot, finding out what their passions are about, then you can develop a little plan, you know, like month to month, what you're going to do to be in contact with the individual. It doesn't have to be in person all the time, but also you can send them the great news about impact, about what's happening. And so that's when you can ask, I think, for the support, for the money. And also, you know, also to say, would you consider putting United Way in your will?
Great, thank you. Dan, did you have anything else you wanted to weigh in on?
In the participants, if they have particular questions about where their situation now, and if we could be helpful to any of the participants,
Sure.
we certainly would welcome where you are in your work with Plan Giving, and what questions, or if you're trying to get started, what are some of the blockers and so forth that are making it difficult for you to get started.
So go ahead, Constance. You can unmute and ask your question. Great.
Sure. Thank you so much. This is so helpful. So I've been with United Way of Central Maryland for about 9 months. I came from a private sector career in technology, and I'm just delighted to be doing just incredibly fulfilling work for our community. What I have experienced here is we have such great donors. There's been a great, decades-long cultivation of those donors for their annual gifts. But I find that when I start asking about planned gifts, specifically for some individuals in my portfolio who are retired or soon to retire, they're all of a sudden starting to scale back their annual gifts. And again, being rather new to the organization, of course, the first thing I think is, well, this seems like a perfect opportunity to sit down with that donor and say, we would love to have your legacy as part of this organization because you have been giving it to us for 20 years. I have one donor in particular who lived here, worked here for a big financial advisory firm, and has now moved back to where she's originally from in New England. And so my challenge is she's relocated permanently, but her heart is here to some extent, but she's every year scaled back her annual gift. I definitely feel that in my conversations with her, she's interested in making some sort of legacy gift. I guess my question is, I've read up on our organization's process, right, for meeting with her and talking to her about deferred versus current gifts. And I've tried to make myself as smart as possible on how I talk to her. I guess what I then get to is the point where I want to know, how do I get her to actually do it? Like, do I need her financial advisor on the phone? Do I need her to just take a screenshot of her will? Like, what does it look like to actually close it and like get it done? Do you know what I mean? Does
Right.
that make sense?
Constance, it's wonderful that you have an ongoing relationship with this person and that you seem to know her well, or pretty well. And sometimes it's saying, we have this program, this legacy program, where we are asking people, would they consider endowing their annual gift so that their good work and their commitment to this community can continue far in the future.
Right.
And we have a little commitment form here that I'll be happy to send you. And it has, various possibilities or ways that you might consider giving, which might be stock or just various other ways of giving. And that kind of gets it closer then to the person saying, well, I've got to talk to my financial advisor, or I've got to talk to a family member and so forth. But once you make the ask, you get where the person is, and you see how they're feeling and what maybe some of the things that are going through their mind. And but having that commitment form, which I'm sure Central Maryland has. So that's an approach I take. And once you get in that dialogue, then if other questions arise, you'll be able to deal with them or find someone in the office that can answer those questions. But unless you ask and listen for the feedback, they may say, oh, I've done that years ago, or I never thought about that, or no one ever asked me to do it. And so it's saying, you're a treasured donor for so many years. We'd love your name to continue forever. It's how do you feel about that? Just ask, how do you feel about that? And listen. So you learn more about the donor, and then introduce maybe a list of other people that have given it. You have legacy members probably already in your United Way. Or maybe if you're brand new, in the records, or in the past minutes, people that gave gifts through wills and so forth. So having maybe a list of other donors that you can say these are other levels of giving. So those are two things that you might do. Does that help?
Very, very helpful. I want to thank you so much for all of the advice on sort of cultivating that relationship, and also sort of expanding, that relationship possibly to include others that individual may wish to recommend. Very interesting what you say about the commitment form. One of the things that I have noticed since being here is that there's and I just am also taking some training through an organization called Veritas to help our organization with more relationship type
Right,
fundraising, right? Rather than sort of a transactional approach
right,
that
right.
sometimes I think we take because we've
We were
cultivated.
strong transactional people.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. But we're getting to the point where those transactional activities, you know, are not getting us where we want to be, let's say.
True.
So at the end of the day, I guess I want to just kind of expand on what you said about the commitment form. What I find internally is, as I've been doing this Veritas training, is there's a whole segment on planned giving and the fact that major gifts officers, which I am, sometimes have a concern that getting a planned gift is more complicated than that they think it's more complicated than it is, right?
Right,
So when
right,
you mention the commitment form, like I'm all about that conversation and that relationship. Like I want to connect with my donor. But then at the end of the day, right, I have the folks in my finance organization and in my membership organization and elsewhere who are going to say to me, okay, well, we need that pledge in writing. Like we need to be
right,
able to
right,
confirm that we
right.
have that gift. And I haven't been able to locate this commitment form that you mentioned. So it could just be me being new. So I'm going
Right.
to I'm going to ask a few more
But
questions internally.
I always include an envelope,
Yeah.
so it shows that you're interested in getting a response back, either
Aha.
one. And the other rationale would be that, we like to be able to, this is the way we can document for our audit process that
Yes.
something signed
Mhm.
and so forth. It's not what would you say, something that a person can change, but
Right. Right.
it's in a form of intent to do. This
Yes.
is what I plan to do. Sometimes people will give you the gift immediately, and I've had that
Yeah.
experience where I'm glad you came.
Yeah. Here's
I
a
had
check.
I had some stock, and I got 250,000 in 2 weeks from a donor who said, "You came at the right time. It's been a great year. We'll give you stock," and turned over the stock, endowed their Tocqueville gift.
Incredible.
Yeah,
That's it. Mhm.
I've had people say, "No, I won't do any. This is new to me. Won't do it. Can't do it." And you might get a call a week later and say, "Tell me a little more about how I can do this." And we had a woman, 90 years old, been a long time donor, giving $300 a year. We talked to her, and she said, "No, I don't think so." Then a week later, she called back and she said, "I talked to my stockbroker, and we had some old stock that my husband bought years ago. I'll give you $15,000." Then the next year, another 15,000. So from that $300, we got 30,000. Far greater endowment than we were ever asking for. But it's just asking and making people aware, and consistently making the calls and using volunteers. I found multiplying yourself through volunteers, or getting a little group of volunteers to go to work with you on that side, just like we do in the annual campaign, really make a huge difference in your success and results. Because sometimes with small staff, you need to engage other people to help.
So
That
Constance, if you can't find that form, there are resources all over the place. Carol, don't we have resources through United Way Worldwide where you can get a sample form?
Can you?
I was going to offer to I'll send you some information at the end so that you get this. And I also think for those of you who don't know, we have mentors available, people like Denise and Dan that can simply have regular one-on-ones with you to talk through things just like this, basic questions, Q&A, help you, guide you through this process. So, why don't you and I have a one-off to at least talk through that so you know what that looks like. And if you're okay with it, I'll touch base with you on Monday because I'm off tomorrow, and just we'll take it from here.
I
Okay.
would love that. I am out of the office Monday, but Tuesday for sure. And I would be so excited to get that advice from you all and talk through the details of it, and help my organization, hone that process. I feel really great about the way I'm interacting with some of my donors in an
Right.
authentic way and sharing. But when I get to the point where I can see that they're ready, I'm kind of at a loss. I feel like I have a gap in my training on how to get the, let's be honest, get the donation on the books, right?
Well,
So that the
it's-
organization can
Right.
report it, right?
Well,
Right.
Constance Veritas is going to help you with that too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited. It's going to be
Good.
great. Thank you. Have you had experience with them, Denise?
Yes, our United Way also used them. Trained a lot of people. Yeah.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much, all. I'm sorry to have taken up.
Um,
I hope others will jump in. Thank you.
No problem. So we did
Hey,
have.
this is Wes Wicker. Believe it or not, I'm on by phone.
Woo! Well, that's great. Thank you, Wes, for joining us. We know this has been a bit of a technology, moment.
Yeah,
So
what a calamity.
yeah, what a
So,
calamity. Do you
I
want to
don't
try
know.
to go ahead and share, and Caitlin can share
Yeah.
your slides?
Yeah, if she can do that, and I'll just skip the introduction, I'll jump right into this.
All right, that sounds great. And we're glad for everybody who hung on with us for this last 30 minutes. We've had some great conversation. So, Caitlin, you may need to unmute yourself so Wes knows where he's at on this slide deck, and we'll take it from there.
All right, we're at the title slide. I'm gonna go to the next slide.
Okay. So, very good. And again, I apologize. We had some technical problems, but I joined the United Way, 30 years ago, and I came from a university, and one of the things that occurred to me that all United Way fundraising was about the here and now, this year's campaign. I'd come out of an environment where universities have a much longer view with relationships and estate gifts. So when I started talking about plan giving and plan giving philosophy, I always liked the adage, best time to plant an oak tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is today. If you haven't started a plan giving program, it would have been great if you'd started when United Way started in your city or hometown, but the next best time to start a plan giving program is, again, today. When I look at legacy giving or plan giving, as it is known, the real purpose of it is to fund programs and operations for a long time, to institutionalize, so to speak, your programs and offices. Strengthens the underpinning of an organization and that it offers stability for the long-term and future viability of the organization. A lot of people ask, what exactly is plan giving? What types of gift are considered plan gifts? And I always start with the most simple, and that is appreciated stocks and bonds. The difference between giving cash and stocks and bonds is that the donor has to make a planned decision on contributing assets, that is stocks and bonds, as opposed to contributing cash. About 93% of all Americans' wealth is in investments and not cash. I would challenge you, if you looked at your own assets, the money you have in all of your accounts, your investments in your house, your car, your IRA, you'll probably find about a 93 to 7% ratio. Second type of plan giving is IRA, direct transfers. I'll talk a little bit about that more in a couple of slides. The most common plan gift, about 80% of all plan gifts in the United States come from last will and testaments. It is simply, I give, bequeath, or bestow X number of dollars to United Way in my estate. And the language in that can be a codicil on a will. It doesn't require a donor to rewrite a will. They can essentially add a codicil or an addendum to the will to include United Way in their will. Gifts of insurance policies are also types of plan gifts. Generally, we don't count term life policies, but any type of whole life or what's called universal life policies, where there is a finite amount of premiums paid. Those are good gifts, and they can be documented and counted in actuarial terms, and sometimes those are very large gifts. And then gifts of tangible property. Very few United Ways have been set up in terms of their business operations to accept gifts like art or jewelry or land. But I can tell you that a number of people have considerable assets in all three of those areas, and learning how to accept gifts of tangible property can be very beneficial to your United Way. And then you've all probably heard of charitable trust. There are charitable remainder unit trust, charitable remainder annuity trust, charitable lead trust, and a peculiar animal known as a flip trust. I'm not going to get into any of those. I've been in this business over 40 years, and I've only dealt with a handful of clients that had any of those that I was involved in the planning of the vehicle. Normally, they're going to have an accountant and an estate planning attorney set those up, and you're simply the beneficiary of a unit trust or an annuity trust or lead trust. But it does help you to learn a bit of what each of those are. And you don't have to be a lawyer to learn them. You can now just Google each one of those acronyms and learn a little bit about them. It helps to be conversant in what all those are. But again, 80% of all plan gifts are simply coming from a last will and testament. Okay? When I look at most United Ways, in fact, I'd say sort of flip it around, very few United Ways have full-time plan giving officers. So a few recommendations I would give to every United Way is you earmark one-time gifts to endowment. That is gifts in honor of, gifts in memory of, are by nature one-time gifts. You're not going to receive them again, probably certainly not in memory of. You're not going to receive those again in next year's annual campaign. So why not set those aside into a restricted fund or endowment? Most colleges and universities do that. One-time gifts and honorarium are usually set aside. Another recommendation I would give, and there are several United Ways have large endowments, and they operate by the total portfolio return method of investing. Years ago, there was a common investment practice called the prudent man rule, and this goes back to common law in England, and that was you would invest someone else's money like a prudent man would. And so most early endowments in the United States were set up where only the earnings were spent. You never spent the corpus of a gift. Total portfolio return is a little different, and I'm going to show you an example on the next slide. But we recommend that all endowment funds, all planned gifts or restricted funds adhere to the total portfolio return philosophy. And then your board should set a payout policy. And what we normally see in our firm is payouts of 4 to 5% of the total portfolio. So if you look at the example on the next slide, let's say someone gave you $1 million. It's unrestricted, and the board votes to designate these funds. It came in, let's say, from a last estate. Year in, year out, most endowments average earnings are around 7.5%. So at the end of 1 year, you're going to have $1,075,000. The board has voted on a 5% payout. You're going to spend $50,000. That may go to an after-school program or a food pantry or wherever you decide to spend the money. Obviously, that $50,000 saves operational expenses or appropriation expenses to the United Way. So it builds a better financial platform for your United Way, because you got this $50,000 coming in to alleviate some of your appropriations, grants, or annual expenses. Well, the second year beginning balance then is going to be $1,025,000. And if it's invested again and again, you have average earnings of 7.5%. Then you see the third anniversary, you got 1.1 million. 5% of that is now 55,000. So you see the award each year is growing as the balance grows. And the beginning balance on the third anniversary after you pay out the 55,000 is 1.4 million. So when you look at billion-dollar endowments by places like Harvard and Yale and Stanford, that's how they invest their money. And the portfolio grows, the payout grows over a long period of time. Okay. So the idea of this presentation was, if you don't have a plan giving officer, what can you do to build an endowment and attract plan gifts to your organization? First thing I would say is an internal action, and that is teach the development staff, and particularly the business officers, how to transact a gift of stock. I distribute a cheat sheet to everyone on the front line fundraising, so they understand if you have a major donor, a Tocqueville donor who's going to give $10,000 or $25,000, or a major gift at six figures, they've got the account number that you can give to the contributor, where the money is going to be transferred, and every United Way has a DTC number. That is a wiring number that the donor's broker is going to need to transfer their funds, their stocks, to United Way. I'd also enclose on the spreadsheet your broker's name and telephone number, so that the contributor and the contributor's broker can call them if there's a problem transferring. By the way, I can tell you, while I was at United Way, we had a number of frustrated donors, both United Way in Indianapolis and Atlanta, because they'd called the business office and the business office didn't know how to transact a stock gift. Or they talked to a development officer and the development officer didn't know what the DTC number was. So I would have a cheat sheet for everybody, so everyone has the information. There's nothing sacred about a DTC number. People cannot withdraw money from your United Way. They can only deposit money using the DTC number. So that's very important, that everybody understands how to receive stock or bonds. One of the other tips I would offer is, when making a solicitation to an individual prospect, simply ask the question, have you considered making a provision in your estate plans to endow your annual gift? Or have you considered making an estate gift to United Way? Pretty simple question. If you're having a friendly conversation with one of your Tocqueville donors or one of your major gift prospects and you have a good relationship, so I've always found this an easy question to ask. Oftentimes they may say, well, I've already done it. Just they've done it and haven't informed United Way. Or they may say, well, I might consider that. Send me some more information about it. And there's your opportunity. There's your hook, so to speak, for your next meeting. And the next meeting, you might talk about different types of plan gifts. And then I would always consider, when you're having conversations during campaigns and you're at Tocqueville events or major gift events, consider who the best prospects are for making a planned gift. Widows, widowers, married couples with no children, bachelors, bachelorettes, people who don't have a family essentially to bequeath their assets to are your ideal prospects. But I've got a couple of slides I'm going to talk about a couple of other key prospects. So continuing on the tips, I would produce plan giving literature to go along with your annual campaign literature, include testimonials from people who've made plan gifts. People like to see what other people have done, and that can particularly be effective if you've got a well-known citizen and a community leader in your town who's made an estate gift to United Way. One of the simplest things you can do to find plan giving prospects essentially put these 3 sentences at the end of each pledge card with a check in the box opportunity. I might consider including United Way in my estate plans. Please send information on making an estate gift. And then the last box, I've already included United Way in my estate plans. So I remember when I first went to United Way and had to fight with the marketing department to include these 3 simple sentences on the bottom of the pledge card. At the end of the first year, they came back and said, of all the pledge cards we've gotten, we only had 45 people out of over 100,000 contributors who checked these boxes. And my response was, that's a great response. I now have 45 plan giving prospects that I didn't have at the beginning of last year. One of those plan giving prospects ended up a couple of years later leaving United Way $16 million. So I would say those 3 lines were certainly worth the fight with marketing, just to add those 3 sentences on the bottom of a pledge card. And the key is, don't expect you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of requests for information. You're not going to get hundreds of people checking boxes, but everyone who does have just self-identified as a plan giving prospect or a plan giving donor for you. So the key here is to follow up with them personally. The fact that they've self-identified has given you the license to go out and meet with these people and discuss an estate gift with them. So let's talk about the best prospects. I mentioned some, widows, widowers, married couples with no children. But the very first bullet point, the best prospect for a plan gift are longtime contributors, regardless of their annual gifts. In the United Way world, we have workplace payroll deduction contributors and you have individual contributors. I would pay close attention to those individuals who contribute outside workplace giving, because for whatever reason, they are motivated to give to United Way. And I would argue that they are probably more loyal contributors to United Way than the average workplace donor. They're making an effort outside the workplace to contribute to United Way. Long-term contributors, I always loved this story. When I was a vice president at Kennesaw State University, we received a notice from an attorney that we'd received a sizable estate gift from a woman. I immediately went to look her up because I didn't know her. When I looked her up on our database, it turned out she had been giving us $25 a year for over 20 years. When she passed away, she left Kennesaw State $750,000. The key marker here was that she was a long-term contributor. And this is what we later found out. And this is pretty typical of a plan gift. And she gave a lot of gifts to charity. She was not particularly wealthy. In fact, I'm not even sure she would be considered middle class. Her husband worked at Martin Marietta, which is now part of Boeing, I believe. And, he worked the assembly line. So they never had a lot of money. But when he retired, he had a nice pension, and they had paid their house off. When she died, she was the second to die. The estate sold their house, and we received the benefit. And what was probably a middle-class house 35 years ago was now worth there were $500,000, and we received that gift. The longtime contributors are key prospects. Other contributors other contributors or other prospects, I should say. People begin typically in the United States. Most people write their first will at about 60 years old. And then for gifts from IRAs, donors who are 70 and a half years old qualify to make a gift from an IRA. And then, as I mentioned earlier, couples with no children are key prospects. So right now, we are in the middle of what is known as the second golden era of plan giving. The first era of plan giving came from the greatest generation, who were savers. And the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the United States occurred when the greatest generation, those who grew up in the Depression era, and passed their wealth on to their children, who were baby boomers. That was the first generation of plan giving, the first great wealth transfer. Baby boomers in 2024 are now as young as 60 years old and as old as 79 years old. These are people who are making their estate plans now. They inherited more money than any generation before them. You may argue, it's too early to tell, obviously, but they may inherit more money than the generations behind them, because their parents were very conservative savers. They live below their means, unlike their children. So IRAs were created during the Reagan administration in the 1980s. Not only did the baby boomers inherit more money from their parents than any previous generation, they're the first generation to be able to take advantage of tax-deferred savings. One of the interesting things, and you can read about this in Giving USA and the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University, is that baby boomers tend to give to more traditional causes. And in spite of all the attention given to environmental causes, DEI, and online fundraising, the reality is all of those to this day make up less than 9% of all philanthropy in the United States. Furthermore, environmental causes have not surpassed 5% in total giving in the United States. So the baby boomer population tends to give to more traditional household name causes in general. I know there are exceptions to that, but the truth of the matter is that that is where the baby boomers give their money. This is a great advantage for United Way, because United Way is a household name charitable organization, well known in the United States. So it bodes well for plan giving purposes that United Way has the reputation it does. This always shocks people, but this is what I'd like to end with when you consider who your prospects should be. My advice to you is talk to people who have money. That sounds simplistic, but think about this. And again, these are national statistics from Giving USA report this year. 4% of all contributors to charities in the United States give 76% of all donations to charity. That's amazing to me. 4% of not the population, but 4% of people who contribute. If you added in another 6%, so 10% of all contributors, you have 89% of all donations to charity. And that number is of $2,500 or more. So we have in America a relatively small number of people who give $2,500 or $5,000 a year or more. But those people make up the lion's share of charitable giving in the United States. Last point I'll bring in terms of demographics and giving, probably the most significant thing I've seen happen, and I started my career in fundraising in 1984, so exactly 40 years ago. This is the single biggest thing I've seen change. Starting in 2017, Congress passed a law allowing people to give directly from their IRAs. If you're 70 and a half years old, you can make a direct transfer, which is a QCD, a qualified charitable distribution, to your favorite charity up to $105,000 a year. At 73 years old, people have what's called a required minimum distribution. That is, the government says a certain percent of your IRA must be withdrawn and you pay taxes on it. If they give up to $100,000 a year and they're 73 years old, it counts against their RMD. So that's a great opportunity for people to avoid taxes. Now, here's the key. When you give directly from an IRA, you don't get a tax deduction because you never paid tax on that money before. However, if you withdrew the money, you have to pay regular income taxes on it. So this is a tax avoidance tool for people 70 and a half years old. There's two other hidden benefits for the donor. It really doesn't make any difference to you in any way if somebody gave you $100,000 from their IRA or $100,000 from their checking account. For the donor, it's very important to give from your IRA if you're 70 and a half years old or older. And that is, a qualified charitable distribution counts against the RMD and doesn't count against your adjusted gross income, your AGI. If I take money out of my IRA, it counts toward my adjusted gross income, and Medicare premiums are based on an individual's adjusted gross income every year. So by giving that money directly to a charity, it doesn't affect my AGI, and I avoid an increase in my Medicare payments. That's really important to know. And I'll tell you, right now, my firm works with 105 nonprofits in 24 states around the country. I can tell you I've seen more $100,000 gifts coming out of IRAs in the last 2 years than I've seen $100,000 gifts coming from other sources. This is a huge change in the way people are giving money, and it's a huge benefit to the donor. So when I look, I'll sum up here as I'm right at 5 o'clock. When I look at key things for you to know as a major gift officer and executive director of United Way, I would say those key things are most plain gifts are going to come from a simple codicil on a will. And the thing, if I were in your seats, I would be working on is promoting gifts from IRAs. I'll stop there. If we have a couple of minutes, I'll be glad to answer any questions for you. Once again, I'm sorry we had technical difficulties, so I had to rush through this presentation. But
Not
any
a problem.
questions?
It was great, Wes. Thank you so much. I'm just going to encourage people who are still on. We do have several people who are still on the call, and because people will listen to this recording later, if there are questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. This is a great time, and we'll just take a couple more minutes and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
So there is a question in the chat if the slides will be available later afterwards, and the answer to that is yes. Caitlin does a follow-up, which will include the link and the PowerPoint slides, so you'll have them to reference. So thanks for asking, Angie.
Sure. I might add that my contact information's at the end. I'm always glad to talk to any United Way staff or volunteers, and our consulting firm does a charge for conversations, so you don't have to worry about getting engaged with the fee. I'll be glad to talk to you about any of this.
That's great. Thanks, Wes. Well, I'm not seeing anyone unmuting, so my guess is that people are getting ready to log off for the day and maybe just aren't in a position to ask a bunch more questions. But we certainly are available for anyone who may have questions down the road. As a follow-up, I want to remind everybody that we do have sessions coming up in October and in December. And I'm going to just go back to what those sessions are so everybody knows. We have October 24th, our plan giving this session is entitled, I Can't Do All That. And it's rethinking objections to starting a plan giving program. And that'll be led by Rochelle Zeidman and Jeffrey Steck, who are both part of our United Way Next faculty. And then on December 5th, we have a session that will be led by Ann Fox. We will look forward to, having you register for those sessions and participate in the future. And if you've got, I think Caitlin's listing those there, you can go ahead and register today. If you do have an interest in a mentor or just talking further about the different resources that are available through United Way Next with regard to plan giving and endowment, major gifts and resources of that nature, please don't hesitate to email me as a part of the follow-up, and that's included in the follow-up information received or sent through Caitlin. So other than that, Dan, do you have anything else you want to end with?
Terrific job, Wes. Thank you so much. I want to thank Caitlin for her work and Carol for coordinating, and all of you participants for your wonderful work advancing the mission of United Way and for your interest in a great resource plan giving for your community. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dan. And thanks, Wes. It was really great.
Sure.
Yeah,
Thank
wonderful.
you.